The reason I'm making this video is to respond to 3 comments on Aron's video. A lot of my comments weren't going through because of probably the spam filter I was trying too many times, but I was trying because they kept rejecting the information I was trying to share. You can see here I have several comments that is showing for me. A lot of those same points I'll go over in this video. I will say real quick that the common ground we might have is Donald and church leaders and different people, because at the end of the day they are not really part of the religion they say they are. One of the middle comments there, I say that is a much bigger problem for me than the other topics that I was talking about, which is atheism and secular. But I was trying to bring up the members in secular Satan associate with it, and that's sort of the point of this video. Here's what it looks like when I'm in a signed out account from a different browser. You can see more comments show up, and mine are missing. A lot of mine are missing. So they're blocking a lot of my comments from you, but also a lot of your comments from me. I'm not sure if that's new or if there's a reason behind that, but they're doing that to my account. And you shouldn't be for censorship. If any of you think it's great that this information's being blocked, it's not a good thing. But like I said, the point of my video is to express my points, even though I think there are bigger problems. I still want to press the point that that group that you're defending is not entirely family friendly in their own right, but the symbolism alone should be a cause for concern, because symbolism is associated with evil stuff. It should be extremely obvious, but apparently you can't see the connection between how that evil symbol is being used by people. It's really a set of symbols if you consider all the things that they use, not just Satan himself, but the pentagram and the Leviathan cross and other symbols. But really, it's all of them. There's a reason why they want to associate with those symbols so much. It's just darker, because atheism alone is responsible for so much. And in this video I go over this pure atheism and pure Satan, but also the cross section between the two. I have examples of each, and they're massive examples. And there's really no defending it after hearing all this, because satanic groups do exist today, and they're actually active and they're growing. I'll start with an example of that, the biggest example I can find right now. But also go over how there were atheist cults like Jim Jones and how he made them drink the Kool-Aid. You can skip to that part if you are interested in learning just how an atheist cult can exist. And at the very end of the video, I go over Aron himself speaking with the leader of the temple that you're defending. And I just have to say now that you need to be more open-minded on the fact that maybe a handful of them at least might be actual believers in a real Satan, and not just a secular symbolic alignment with Satan. Because in the part that I show that he's speaking with him, they try to play both sides. They try to say they're not a religion and they're not religious, but they say they're trying to get religious rights for their rituals and the things that they want to do with clinics that they're building. You can assume what they're talking about there. I'm going to have to censor that when they do say it. So the big example of an active group that's actually doing these things, and they are religious, is the 7 and 6 and 4 group. I'm not sure if YouTube is okay with saying the name directly. I think that might be why some of my comments wouldn't go through, but I'll just say it like that, and you can put the numbers together. But the overview that's shown, one of the most recent things that they tried to do was a planned thing at a Lady Gaga concert where they're actually planning to hurt people. They are a Satanic Neo-N group that's transnational, so it's in between countries and in different countries. And it's a Diddy torsion network, because they actually try to send lots of bad files to each other. The group was founded in 2021 by Bradley Cadenhead, and the group's name came from its zip code. It shows here that it says that they work through Discord and Telegram, and usually went for children aged 8 to 17, particularly children suffering from mental health challenges. And they would force them to record things like things that would hurt them, and doing things to animals as well, to either share internally or on social media. Also cut signs as a way of branding to show their association with the group. And sometimes they had the end goal of having them live stream themselves doing something where they would no longer be living. And they did it for either the entertainment of the network or their own sense of fame in the network. So the earliest part of this group was in February 2021, where he took a 12-year-old girl in Virginia, United States, and for the things he was doing and what he did, Hearing 350 years in prison. And it goes to show more of the same things I was saying, where he was getting other people and children to do things on camera. See these other sections, it talks about runic symbols and other things that people did for them to share on the network. Fast forward to 2023, you can see in the graphic there they have tridents with 3 6s and dried red body liquid. And you can see more things that got more people into more trouble. This first person was sentenced to 14 years in prison for doing stuff to elderly people. The second point here, 17-year-old founder Bradley Chance Cadenhead pled guilty to 9 counts of diddying material. And at the bottom there, it even shows someone in Hawaii being part of this. And then there's just so much in 2024. I'm just censoring the whole thing. You can check out the Wikipedia page to see all of them. There's several points here. It seems like there's 7 or 8 major things that happened in 2024. And even more happened in 2025. And I had to zoom out just to take a picture of the whole set of crimes that were committed in 2025 associated with this. And it's pretty much the same things, where several children were involved, and it was children victimizing other children a lot of the time, because they had these people running the network influencing children to do things to animals and other children. So with that alone, you can see that there is still groups out there that are doing things to other people and getting children involved, making the children do things, but also making children be the subject of things that involve pain, and so many other things. They do everything possible that's evil, and they do it in the name of Satan. You can see it in the group's description that they are religious and they do believe it, and they do all this evil in his name. It should be plenty, but I have many more examples towards the end of this video that you can see. But I also want to address the high horse of atheism and how atheism has done a lot of damage in itself, because the temple claims that they are a non-theistic religion. So in a sense they are basically atheist, because they don't claim there is a Satan or a God. I'd assume that they have very similar foundations in their belief and what an atheist would argue for defense of their belief system. And these comments were telling me to defend my religion and how theirs and how mine compares to theirs, and how theirs and the atheist beliefs are better than the religions. I'll just say now that I know that not every atheist turns out like the examples I'm going to show, but they're strong examples, and it's too many to just say it's just one person here and there with a mental problem, because these people in these interviews that I show, they talk pretty clearly, and whatever problem they're having goes beyond just how their brain's wired. So it should cover all bases. I start off showing Richard R. and how he admits that he believes in a literal Satan, and he even drew pentagrams on his hand in the court, and all the things that he did. I'll show Jim Jones and how he started a cult, and it was really an atheist cult, because he did carry around a Bible and give off the impression that he was a Christian, but it turns out that he admits to the authorities that he was an atheist. And in his sermons that he would say that the same phrase that atheists say to make fun of Christians, that there's no sky dad, there's no sky father, there's no man in the sky who's going to come and help us. And then he says there's no heaven above, so we have to make it down here. And he even says he'd rather be called the devil than be associated with God, because Satan had the good sense to rebel against God. That's something he said himself. His own lawyer calls him a Satan and an atheist. Although there was really no signs that he was an actual Satan in any form, his own lawyer did call him that, but I think he was just conflating his actions to that. And then I get into the C-bine, and you can try to fill in the name for that, because that's a sensitive topic, so I won't say the full name, but you can skip to that section of the video. But also how they believed in evolution, and they inspired another person, Natalie, who did the same thing as them, targeting Christians, because her belief in evolution, she'd rather help evolution of humans than just have her own life be ended. So as the same reason as them, was inspired by them, the people who did C-bine at that school. And then Jeffery D, he had the same exact reason for why he did what he did. He blamed his belief in evolution, and he said if he had a stronger Christian upbringing, he wouldn't have done the things he done, most likely. He said he didn't feel accountable, and he didn't think there was any reason not to do what he did, since he only had this one life to do what he wanted to do. I show more examples after the Aron raw footage, just to cement it even more that there are real believers in a real devil that do real things for him. Just to cement it in more that what they are, the symbolism they're using is not good. I just show even more after all this. So you could skip to after the Aron Ra footage just to look into it some more, if that's what you're interested in.
True identity was discovered. His name, Richard Ramirez.
Richard Ramirez's whole trip was to hide in a tree or hide behind a fence and watch his victims at nighttime and wait into the wee hours of the night. And then while they slept, creep in, like a coward. And
The Night Stalker killed at least 13 times, 13 people who were awakened in the night to face death. At least 15 others survived his brutal attack. Anger and frustration turned to rage, which he in turn took out on his victims. His killings were so sadistic and brutal that even experienced detectives were shocked.
Well, he took a woman in her 60s and stomped her to death with his foot, leaving an imprint of a shoe on the side of her face. From that to just somebody upon walking into a room after he entered a house. He strangled a ligature, he used a tire iron on a young girl, left her for dead.
Would your anger subside if you had to wipe up your mother's blood? I couldn't finish it. I had to leave my brother to finish that chore.
Why on earth would you have hurt those people? Why did you kill those people?
No comments. No comments. I cannot answer that at this time.
What was Richard's motive?
To kill.
That's it?
To kill.
he told me he needed to associate gruesome violence with sex in order to be completely satisfied. He also told me that he had to violently fantasize about his victims before he could go away.
They are desires, whereas if I didn't give in to them, I would be crushed by them. I believe in the evil in human nature. This is a wicked world, and in a wicked world, wicked people are born. I'm not going to blame society, my race, or people, or anything. It is up to the individual like myself to keep on knocking on whatever door they want to get into.
Many experts felt there was no one Night Stalker. Detectives Carrillo and Salerno disagreed and finally broke the case by matching shoe prints. The subsequent trial turned into one of America's most notorious courtroom dramas, punctuated by continual outbursts from Ramirez. In that trial, Ramirez's fascination with Satan emerged.
As far as Satan is concerned, I believe in a malevolent being. His description eludes me, but I have felt powers that are evil.
After an 8-month trial, Ramirez was convicted of all 13 murders and given multiple death sentences.
I don't care about myself, really. I don't care about what happens to me. I never did, really.
So this part is about Jim Jones, and it shows how he really was an atheist, and he ended up doing bad things with his beliefs. There are parts that depict him with a pentagram on his forehead, which isn't accurate, but they were just doing that to mock him. Just ignore that part of the presentation, and ignore the parts that repeat a few times, because it's just reiterating the fact that he said he was an atheist. Just power through that and listen to the points being made in the presentation.
If you're witnessing to people on the street or sharing the gospel of Christ with certain folks, that people will say that you're getting people to drink the Kool-Aid of religion. And unfortunately, people haven't even researched where that phrase comes from. And they will reference Jim Jones as a Christian leader that murdered a bunch of people. But what they don't understand is that Jim Jones actually was a full-blown atheist by his own admission. In fact, Jim Jones said that he hated God and that the God of the Bible was.
But I hope you'll be more sympathetic for those dear hearts outside that say, God is dead. God is dead.
He knows that I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. He knows that I recognize only love when I say God is love. Well, you heard my preaching, right?
Jim Jones was not a Bible-believing Christian. He was not a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. He even was on record several times saying that there is no heaven up there, so we're going to have to make heaven down here. That's what he said.
There's no hope up there. Nobody's going to come out of the skies. Nobody will ever come to save us. There's no heaven up there. We'll have to make heaven down here.
So keep in mind, this is a full-blown atheist that people often use as an example that Christianity is bad. They will use Jim Jones, the atheist, who murdered a bunch of people, to prove that Christianity is somehow false. Whenever people say, don't drink the Kool-Aid, it just goes to show they haven't even researched who Jim Jones even was or what that statement was all about. Jim Jones gave those people the Kool-Aid of atheism, the Kool-Aid of saying that there is no God, and that's the real Kool-Aid that was given to them. It had nothing to do with Christianity. In fact, it was anti-Christ. Jim Jones has been on record several times saying that his worst enemies are preachers. The worst enemies we have are preachers and religion, he says.
The worst enemies we got are preachers. The worst enemies we've got is religion and its churches. That's the worst.
So really let that sink in. I mean, you have atheists out there all the time that say, don't drink the Kool-Aid of religion, but they don't even realize that phrase is taken from Jim Jones, one of them, an atheist, a communist, a Soviet, somebody that didn't even believe in God. They're using him as an example that Christianity is somehow false and that it's somehow bad.
My bishop knows that I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist.
So I would encourage the atheist community and those who believe that there is no God to just simply do their research themselves before throwing out the blanket statements that we've all heard a million times.
There was a little girl named Julie Reynolds that was being forced to take it. She was about 13, I guess, and she kept spitting it out, and they were forcing her to take it.
Only a few people drank it willingly. You would drink it too if they were standing over you with a gun and said you have to drink the juice right now. You didn't have a choice.
Even my son's 9th grade math teacher said it, and my son came home and he said, Mom, she said, you know, don't drink the Kool-Aid. And I'm thinking, why does she not know? And she's a teacher. Why would they not know? Why do people not know this? What's really behind that? Why minimize something like that? I'd love to start something that people would understand. Please don't take that so lightly. People suffered.
God is dead, if he ever was alive. That God of the unknown variety is dead.
Well, thank you for the feedback, because I must say I've felt somewhat hypocritical for the last years as I became an atheist. I have become, you feel tainted by being in the church situation. But of course everyone knows where I'm at. My bishop knows that I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. He knows that I recognize only love when I say, I'll say God is love. Well, you heard my preaching, right? Where I'm at.
But I hope you'll be more sympathetic for those dear hearts outside that say, God is dead. God is dead, if he ever was alive. That God of the unknown variety is dead. That's why there should be, for a moment, as the good John Birch Reader said, he said he wished that everybody for a moment would wake up to what I'd said. Just for a moment think that there's no God. He said, then maybe we might do something to help ourselves. I am a savior because I save everybody that comes to me. But don't call me your creator, Sky God. I would rather you call me the devil, because he had the sense to rebel. He had the good sense to rebel.
I then would have nothing to do with God, have nothing to do with that Sky God, have nothing to do with this Bible. You're going to help yourself or you'll get no help. There's only one hope of glory. That's within you. And I'm showing you the thing within you. The revolution in me is showing you the Christ revolution in you. That's the only hope of glory. There's no hope up there. Nobody's going to come out of the skies. Nobody will ever come come to save us. There's no heaven up there. We'll have to make heaven down here.
The worst enemies we got are preachers. The worst enemies we've got is religion and its churches. That's the worst.
I was the lawyer and attorney for the notorious Jim Jones. Jim Jones had set up his colony in the forests in Guyana. There were not Christians. Jim Jones did not believe in God. It was a cult. He was a... Indeed, if he believed in anything, he believed in the communist ideology, which he proclaimed in his last will and testimony, leaving everything to the Soviets.
So this part is about Dylan and Eric. They did the C-bine thing. Can't talk about it on YouTube, the exact event, but it involved a school, the C-bine school. So the shirt he's wearing says natural selection. This is from a movie. I think it was made by Christians, so it might be a biased source for that picture. But there is references to evolution and natural selection in their writings that they did. And it explains why they did what they did at that school. So this source, Psychology Today, shows his fascination with the H person from the G country and natural selection. And he had rants about ending people who had mental deficiencies. He was full of hate and loved it. And there's a quote from his journal where he said he wanted to kick up natural selection a few notches. And that was a year before he did what he did. And you can see how it influences other people. This is at least one person, Natalie. Her last name's Rupp now, but I'll just stick to saying her first name for this. It says the motive for what she did was not immediately known, and it was not clear if the people were targeted, because it was a Christian school that she went after. But based on the source that Newsweek had, it says she was able to get stuff from her father, and she carried out what she did because it was better for evolution rather than one stupid, boring. It says here that she ended up doing what she did because she thought it was better for evolution. And they received it from her boyfriend, according to this source, the things she said she was planning and why she did it. And this source, Unilad, reports that she wore a KMFDM t-shirt. And that was a band that Eric liked from the C-bine event. And with that, I have another presentation by Matt Powell where he goes over more detail about what they did and his thoughts on it.
My name is Matt Powell, and I've done extensive research on the Columbine. I've spent many hours looking into the life of Eric Harris, the life of Dylan Klebold, and what inspired them to carry out one of the biggest in U.S. history to date.
One by one, students returned to Columbine High and left bouquets of flowers in a park half a mile away.
Parents, hug your kids. Pray that, be happy that you're with them. Kids, grab your friends, hold them tight, and never be mad at people because it could happen in a second that they'll be gone. People were getting shot around me.
There was a guy at a table right next to me and her, and they just shot him and then walked away, and then he was just sitting there in a pool of blood.
Detectives now believe they entered the school through a back door and stormed down the hallways. They cornered students in the cafeteria and the library where there was nowhere to run. Witnesses say they laughed as they fired their classmates who begged for their lives.
They were of color wearing a white hat or played a sport, and they didn't care who it was, and it was all at close range.
Screaming after they'd shoot up something, they'd go, woo! Just a pleasure for them.
This morning, students packed a prayer service at a local church and stood in the parking lot, embraced one another, and wiped away their tears. Graduation was less than 2 weeks away.
Now, Dylan and Eric were bullied in the school, and there was a lot of other students that would actually pick on them. And instead of turning to the Lord Jesus Christ or to God, they actually turned to the belief system that they held at the time. And that belief system was in survival of the fittest and was evolution theory. They were avid believers in racism, and they wanted to eliminate what they considered to be the weakest. This actually took place on They were part of the Trenchcoat Mafia, a group of racist people that followed Hitler's ideologies. Now, when the media did reports on the Columbine, they did not mention what the Columbine actually believed and what actually caused the Columbine to do what they did. In fact, to this day, it's considered to be a mystery as to why did such a horrible thing to the students at Columbine.
They hated jocks, loved the internet, and were fascinated by World War II. They were known as the Trenchcoat Mafia. The question is, why didn't anyone know they turned so violent? The clues were here in Littleton long before the yearbook pictures with handwritten captions about insanity. This alleged Trenchcoat Mafia website shut down shortly after ABC News took these pictures. It even had a so-called hit list mentioning jocks and one substitute teacher as potential.
Eric Harris created a website that promoted evolution theory. And in fact, what drove him to murder his own classmates was actually his belief in atheism and in evolution. In fact, on his website, he posted, "You know what I love? Natural selection. It's the best thing that ever happened to the earth. Getting rid of all the stupid and weak organisms. But it's all natural. Yes." And so Eric Harris was heavily indoctrinated to believing in a lie and acting out based on that belief system. Eric and Dylan were actually fascinated by Adolf. Now, Adolf was not a Christian. Many people today believe that he was, but Sir Arthur Keith, who lived at the same time as Hitler and even wrote books on evolution, said, and I quote, "I've consistently maintained is an evolutionist. He has consciously sought to make the practice of conform to evolution." And so what drove Hitler to exterminate and murder millions and millions of people and Jews was his belief in evolution and his belief in survival of the fittest and wiping out the weakest. Hitler stated that he wanted to wipe out what he considered to be inferior races. Absolutely a racist. He even wrote in his book, he says, "All who are not of good race are chaff." So Hitler was not a Bible-believing Christian. Christianity doesn't cause people to act in such a way. And so wiped out and murdered millions of people based on his belief in Darwinism. Now, when people say that Darwin was some great scientific mind and that Darwin knew science very well, it just goes to show they haven't actually researched anything about Charles Darwin. Darwin was actually afraid that he was living in a fantasy. He even said, and I quote, "Often a cold shudder has run through me, and I have asked myself whether I have devoted myself to a fantasy." Charles Darwin was afraid that he was living in a fantasy. Now, I don't know why anybody would trust somebody like that, but Hitler trusted Darwin, and he believed in Darwinism, and Darwinism was what caused him to exterminate and murder thousands and even millions of people. And so the Columbine were fascinated by this, and they even dressed up just like the Hitler Youth would dress. They carried out the shooting on Adolf.
Okay, we've got help on the way, ma'am. Okay. Oh, God, it's right outside the library door. Okay, I don't think I'm going to go out there. Okay, I've got the kids on the floor. I got all the kids in the library. I can't believe he's not out of the woods. He just keeps shooting and shooting and shooting. Okay, yeah, we've got Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's up. Okay. Everyone stay on the floor. Stay on the floor. Stay under the table. I'll call it. Oh, God. It's not, you know, What's your name, ma'am? My name is Patty.
They went through the entire school terrorizing students and trying to intimidate them. They even made racial slurs against Isaiah Shoels and said that he was inferior in evolution, that he hadn't fully evolved. And they blew him away as he was begging for his life.
They came up and they saw Isaiah. And Isaiah was one of the very few black students in the school. And they began to make fun of Isaiah for being black. And the last thing that Isaiah heard in his life were racial slurs being made against him. And the last thing that he said was, "I want to see my mom." And they shot him in the head. And then my friend Matt.
These are the damaging effects of teaching your kid that they're nothing more than an animal and that it's about survival of the fittest. You know, Christianity has always been about survival of the weakest. We want to help the weakest. It's to protect the weakest. The Bible says that we should support the widow and the fatherless. But in evolution, it's all about being the strongest and protecting the strongest, and only the strongest survive. And so they carried out the shooting, dressed just like the Hitler with the trench coats, the same people that would go around and murder and wipe out people that they thought were inferior according to evolution. Earlier I mentioned Sir Arthur Keith and the fact that he stated that Hitler was an evolutionist. Hitler was not a Christian. Many people say he was a Christian, but even Sir Arthur Keith, who wrote books on evolution, a man perfectly situated to comment on Hitler's life, said that he was not a Christian, he was an evolutionist. And that's what caused him to exterminate millions of people. There is no race. There's only one race, and that's the human race. To believe in evolution is to be racist in your ideology. So if you want to continue believing evolution, you have to believe what comes along with it. It's part of the package, racism is. The Columbine believed in racism because of evolution, because evolution is a racist religion. They even wrote before they died that what they did in killing their fellow students and teachers, they did it because they were taught evolution at the school. So right from their own mouths, right from their own journals, they said that the reason that they did this was because they were taught evolution. They were taught that they were nothing more than an animal, than an evolved primate.
This section is about Jeffery D. From what I can tell, he was an atheist. He says for himself that the reason why he felt justified in what he was doing was his belief in evolution, and how not having a stronger religious upbringing most likely let him feel like he was allowed to do the things that he wanted to do. And he ended up eating other people and taking people's children and doing all kinds of terrible things. A lot of people try to make to him, but there's not really any evidence other than he seemed to like rewatching the movie Exorcist, or one of the Exorcist movies. But you can hear himself say that he felt justified in doing what he did because he believed in evolution at the time.
Your dad has wondered about all kinds of things, from the medication that your mom was on during her pregnancy, to the fact that you were exposed to violent arguments in the home from an early age and continuing, to the possibility that he might have passed on some genetic propensity for obsession or violent behavior. Does any of that ring true to you?
I can see why he'd wonder about those things, but as far as I'm concerned, they're all excuses, because I didn't feel accountable to anybody. I didn't feel that I had to to face what I had done ever. And so there comes a point where a person has to be accountable for what he's done. Can't go around making excuses, blaming other people or other things. So I alone am the one who's responsible for what's happened.
Let me ask, when did you first feel that everyone is accountable for their actions?
Well, thanks to you for sending that creation science material, because I always believe the lie that evolution is truth, the theory of evolution is truth, that we all just came from the slime, and that was it. There was nothing. So the whole theory cheapens life, and started reading books about that show how evolution is just a complete lie. There's no basis in science to uphold it, and I've since come to believe that the Lord Jesus Christ is the true creator of the heavens and the earth. It just didn't just happen, and I have accepted Him as my Lord and Savior, and I believe that I, as well as everyone else, will be accountable to Him.
Growing up, did you feel that you were accountable to your dad or to your mom as the authority figure in the house?
Yes, I did. I mean, they didn't let me run wild. They disciplined me, and so I felt accountable to them. But afterwards, after I left the home, that's when I started wanting to sort of create my own little world where I could be the one who had the complete control, where I didn't have to bow to anyone else's demands, and I just took it way too far.
Lionel?
At that period of time, I had drifted away from a belief in a supreme being, and I never, as a result, passed along the feeling that we are all accountable in the end. He owns us. And that basic concept is very fundamental to all of us.
You feel that the absence, at least for a while, of a strong religious faith and belief
for some years
may have prevented you from instilling some of that in Jeff.
That's right.
Is that how you feel?
Yes, I think I had a big part to do with it. I mean, if a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. And I've since come to believe that the Lord Jesus Christ is truly God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They're the only true God.
Most of these leaders listed here and the number of people associated with passing away due to their actions and the things they were forcing on their own countries, most of these leaders were atheists, and they forced atheism on their citizens. And then you have the H-man from the G country. He claimed to be Christian, but clearly he wasn't acting out of the biblical beliefs. Joseph and Mao also heavily forced their beliefs on their citizens against God, belief in any God. And you can see just those two alone are almost 100 million people who passed away. Their own citizens that they were forcing to follow their rules and their way of thinking. Here is an overview of the temple that was brought up in those comments. They advocate for secularism, social justice, and individual freedom. Aron specifically talked to Lucian Greaves, which you can see is listed there. And according to their FAQ section on their website, they don't believe in a real Satan or in the supernatural, but they believe a religion can and should be separated from superstition. So they want to identify as a religion. And they also seem to care a lot about rights involving women. In the video section I'm going to show, he says there's a ritual associated with what they do at the clinics. But what they do is not the ritual itself when they're in the clinic, but they do one before doing what they do at the clinic. But many people over the years have compared what they do at those clinics to bail offerings in the Bible. You can go to that verse there, 2 Kings 17:17, that talks about them offering their newborns. And it would go to this altar for the demon Baal. And there's also Moloch in the Bible, which is very similar. And many people think that this is their real reason for why they care so much about those rights, because they don't really push too much else as far as their rights. And specifically, they're going over how these clinics they're opening is going to be able to allow them to get them before they're born, even though the ritual specifically was supposed to be after they're born in the ancient rituals. And again, I just have to say it again, these people identify with the devil specifically as a symbol, even though they say they don't believe in him. In this Bible verse, John 8:44, ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a life taker from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there's no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it. But many people believe, if you believe the Bible, then you're going to believe people who associate themselves with the devil, whether they say that he's real or not, that these people are using the devil as a symbol, are going to lie, and in this case, possibly lie about whether they actually believe in a real devil or not. You can see this part, what's part of this video. You should be able to go to that section of the video to see more context, to see the original, where Aron talks to Lucian about the clinic that they plan to open, which seems to be the third one as far as this video. Listen to what he says here. You can hear him say there's a ritual and how they want religious rights, and you can come to your own conclusion on whether you believe that every single one of these people that is part of this group actually does not believe in a Satan.
Continue providing services as we can nationwide. We've been putting forward lawsuits in defense of our religiously protected right, our religiously protected right, our religiously protected right to provide abortion. And it still remains fairly untested. We've had some of the cases thrown out on technical grounds. Judges have refused to really confront the core legal question, because I think it's really difficult to do that. And I think it's really difficult to say that we don't have the religious liberty to do this, especially with the expanse of religious liberties being offered now to other religious liberty groups. And we have an abortion ritual, and I bring this up for a reason. The ritual is there for people who are getting an abortion, would like to kind of reaffirm the affirmative values that lead them to make this decision, and reaffirm for them that it's okay in an environment where there's forces trying to bring a lot of pain, shame, humiliation, and inconvenience to anybody who's going to try to terminate pregnancy. And in that way, this abortion ritual just helps kind of reaffirm the decision made and contextualize it within our tenets in the deeply held beliefs of those actually getting the abortion procedure. But because this is attached to a ritual, it's sort of really difficult to disentangle from the types of protections offered, especially under RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Of this third one, we realize we really have to do better to do a sustained pitch to get people to recognize this, to get the word out, get some media attention, because, I mean, honestly, we do need it to keep operations going. We do operate these things based upon the donations given to us, but we've been honestly terrible at kind of keeping up on the propaganda and getting out there and doing the interviews and things like that. Because I think a lot of us doing this, people a lot of times will see us when people are laughing, saying, "Wow, you're really opening a hilarious," and feel like we're just doing victory laps all the time. But you might be surprised to hear we're actually really controversial. We get a lot of hate mail. We get a lot of people
You get hate mail?
Yeah, we get a
As
lot of people
satanic
yelling rude shit,
organization?
and yeah, so it can kind of can kind of make you feel more relaxed when you're not in the spotlight and when people aren't concentrating on what you're doing. You can really get used to the lulls in the action, but you know, we do need to get the word out. So
During these ceremonies, was Satan, the devil, ever referred to?
He was called Lucifer.
What did they say about the devil, about Lucifer?
That people made him happy.
Who made you do this?
My nan. I've seen loads of babies, just newborn babies. After they killed it, they would eat it. They threatened to kill my little girl.
You mean you had a child?
Yeah,
How old were you when you had that child?
11.
Do you get frustrated with people who just won't accept that these things do happen?
Yes, because I've worked with prisons for years. We have no doubts that men can do that. And yet when we start talking about men within Satanism who actually believe in evil and it's the right to express evil, we suddenly have a doubt.
So that was from an interview with someone named Teresa. I think she was 15 in that interview. And you can go to that video to learn more and see more of what they say in it. A lot of people doubt her story because there was a lot of people claiming things like that in the 80s. They call it a panic. But you can watch it for yourself and come to your own conclusion on whether you believe it or not. There were people arrested, and they mentioned that in that interview. It was on 60 Minutes. But I have more examples of real stories that are confirmed of people doing evil things in the name of the devil. This one actually happened very close to where I live, in Kentucky. I live on the other side of the river in Ohio. And this woman, she was spellcasting on people that were confronting her after finding her mother missing body parts in the yard. And the parts that were missing, she was cooking in pots in the house. There's actually a lot of story behind this. They say some people think she might have got a mental disorder from an accident she had on a motorcycle. But she was into this stuff beforehand. She was in Hollywood trying to become an actress. But somewhere along the line, she went back home to Kentucky. You can look into that story. This story is about a couple that gave themselves up as an offering on a Greek island. I think this is a picture of the girlfriend in that couple, and you can see she has that red stuff. She ended up giving herself up. I think that's her because I just got the picture from a video that was talking about the story. Then there's this group that had a ring, and it says they were posing as witches and wizards, but they probably really were into real sorcery. And they would give children money for things they would do to them. And they'd even force older ones to do things to younger ones. And look how many people was involved with this. Ian Owens, Elaine Lannery, Leslie Williams, Paul Brannon, Scott Forbes, Barry Watson, John Clark were all found guilty of organizing the gatherings between 2010 and 2020, where they were doing all these things. And if you look at the article, they just mention wands and some type of ritual, doing some type of magic. I wish there was more on this story, but that's all I could find based on this article. And then there's this other story about a janitor who was in the same boat, putting body fluids in school food. And I think there was more to that story, so you can look into that as well. I have one more example. It's kind of a longer example, and I call him Mr. Call. His old channel name was A Call for an Uprising. As of me making this video, he's not on YouTube anymore, only his own website, but he goes through another story and plays news footage of that.
To the truth, which brings me to Adolfo Costanzo. For anyone out there that isn't familiar, he was a Cuban-American serial and cult leader who led an infamous drug and occult gang in Mexico that was dubbed the Narco. Cult members nicknamed him the Godfather. Costanzo led the cult with Sarah Aditre, whom followers nicknamed the Godmother. The cult was involved in multiple ritualistic killings including the murder of Mark Kilroy, an American student abducted, tortured in 1989. And had they not gone after an American, they probably would still be getting away with it to this day. But because so many Americans got in an uproar about it, the American government decided to try to do something about it. And in this clip from 1989, they'll show you the cauldron, they'll show you the bones, and they'll openly talk about Satan.
30 miles from his Brownsville home, Mauricio Rodriguez stared in disbelief at the Santa Elena Ranch, at a one-room shack filled with candles and other reminders of the devil worship that ended the life of 21-year-old Mark Kilroy, one other unnamed U.S. citizen, and 10 Mexicans. Outside, a scorched cauldron still holds the remains of what authorities say is human brain matter, animal parts, and blood.
Shock was what happened over here, and I never believed it.
So far, authorities have unearthed 9 shallow graves, still filled, some of them with human hair, skin, and body parts. They believe 2 more young victims remain buried here, that Mark Kilroy spent 12 hours on the ranch before dying.
They wrapped heavy duct tape around his eyes and forehead and face and his head. They assured him that he was not going to be harmed, that he was not in danger. They fed him some bread and water, we understand, and then one of them ultimately came up behind him with the machete and hit him across the back of the head with it.
Authorities say that the devil here may be a brand of voodoo or black magic that comes from the Caribbean and Cuba, and that the Padrino or Godfather is a Cuban still on the loose. From a balcony at federal police offices in Matamora, not far from where Kilroy disappeared, authorities paraded 4 suspects who admit to cult involvement. 2 who say they helped abduct Mark Kilroy on March 14th as he celebrated spring break in Matamora. 1 bared his shoulder to reveal 6 ceremonial marks, 1 for each person he said he had. The suspects say that at one point Mark Kilroy almost escaped his fate at Santa Elena, that he got away but was recaptured by this group of Satanists who believe that the souls of their dead would protect their drug.
And if all that isn't enough, I'm not sure what else would be. And you can see this shirt here. It's kind of a meme that goes around. But this is really what they're into, at least on the higher levels. And people who want more power from this religion. And it's not really something you should joke about. It shouldn't be something people find funny. But they joke about it because a lot of them really are into this. So it should be obvious. Pentagrams and all this other symbolism that they use, it really represents evil. And if the more you look into it, the more you can see that it is evil. And the news doesn't really cover this. They said it was a panic in the 80s, even though I've proven that there were really people doing it. As much as they try to say, look at all these fake cases, they really need to look at the ones that are real. And if it wasn't real then, it's definitely real now. But you can assume it was real then. Like I'm showing here on the screen, this is Richard, who really believed in a real devil and associated himself with it. You can see it on his hand, a pentagram, and the things that he did, and just all the many examples I've shown through this video. And the temple is trying to go into schools and tell the students that none of this is real. And I don't think they're going to be very successful. And like I've said, I think there's more important things to talk about and more important people doing worse things and have more power than this temple. And these people use pentagrams too, and they call themselves Christians. You see Order of the Eastern Star? It's really the free, and then the letters M, A, S, and O, and N, and S. I'll be talking about them in an upcoming video, a really long video, almost 2.5 hours, and I believe that deserves way more attention.